We are live with another coronavirus journal.
How is this possible? We're in 2021.
Dude, we're going on 2 years.
It's July now.
Yeah. We started this because we were trapped inside and we didn't have anything else to do. And we thought, let's kind of just cover what's going on in the world. This is a historic event.
We'll do this show for a couple months.
At most, it was supposed to be 15 days to flatten the curve. Remember when
I thought it was over by Easter.
Yeah.
It's going to be several Easters now.
But it's still going on a little bit, I guess. And so
That's what we're going to talk about today is
yeah.
I have been feeling like it is over. That's not what the news is saying.
We're just tired of it, and we were just in Vegas, and we were not social distancing. We were not masking up.
We were not.
And so, yeah, it feels like it should be over. And then I come back to Puerto Rico, and everybody's got the mask still. And
I just went to the plaza, and the security guard was like, masks. And I'm like, what? Like,
we're outside.
Yeah, and I wear the mask to my table and then take it off. I wear the mask past him, and then I take it off, sit down, and have dinner. It was weird.
Yeah, so where should we begin? And maybe we should end tonight. I had what I believe is the biggest argument with your fiance ever last night. And so maybe...
I feel it was an argument among all four of us.
But I was the instigator.
Yeah, but like we were all arguing I don't know, but that you want to get into that? Is that how this show is going to end?
This will be the grand finale, and you guys can determine how big of an asshole I am. Where do you want to begin with the coronavirus journal? Should we just get to one of these clips here?
Yeah, let's just start with the first one.
Well, give me just a second here. I need to switch this over to number 2. Let me do a test and make sure that works. It does. Okay. So we'll start with number 1, and this is the virus is back. It was gone and now it's back. It never went away.
Painting a grim picture of the new reality inside some hospitals, tonight the numbers from the CDC reflect our nation slowly slipping back towards crisis. As we surpass 50,000 infections a day, new cases, hospitalizations, even daily deaths are spiking again.
It is one of the most infectious respiratory viruses we know of and that I have seen in my 20-year career.
Struggling to contain the Delta variant, Florida, Texas, and Missouri, 3 states with lower vaccination rates, now account for 40% of the nation's new cases. One Kansas hospital turning away patients as they struggle to manage their own caseload.
We're kind of at a tipping point. Yeah, we're past the tipping point. We're in trouble.
Meantime, in Los Angeles County, construction teams are back at Providence St. Joseph's Medical Center, expanding their just-shuttered COVID ward. In the nation's former COVID capital, new infections have increased nearly 2,000%.
We're talking about reopening COVID wards.
Can I just say, I am so sick of the news using percentages like this. This is such crap.
I was going to ask you about that, yeah.
I mean, it could have literally gone from 1 to, I can't do the math because I'm dumb, but is it like 1 to 10? 2 to 10? Is that
2 cases, 2 deaths?
Yeah.
To 10 cases, 10 deaths?
Yeah, well, I'm trying to think of the percentage because like,
and you're like
1 to 2 deaths would be 100%.
Right.
100. We've doubled the amount. Yeah. But what did we start from? So
it's kind of like the stock market. When the stock market goes down 50%, but then it goes up 50%. It's like it's not the same.
Yeah. So it's very misleading.
Are we able to? I think this video goes a little bit longer, and they just talk about how we need to be scared and locked down. Everyone needs to get vaccinated. Are we able to see the numbers for LA or for California? Like, I would like to see what these tick marks are because.
I'll pull it up in just a second. Do you want to finish this clip?
Hit play. I don't know that there's a whole lot more left.
And all these beds in the hallways. Is that disheartening to see?
It's really, really hard.
Nurse manager Chris Rice says with vaccinations, his team is on the front line of a battle they don't need to be on anymore.
Just feels like we're going backwards. And I know that me and a lot of other people here we are feeling very discouraged, very disheartened, in some cases, a little bit angry.
All right. We definitely did not need to watch that.
We didn't need to see that last part.
So I have a video clip here that's kind of within the same vein, and it's about unvaccinated people kind of being the cause or like the majority of the ones dying and being hospitalized. Let's watch that, and then we'll debate or we'll talk about. We'll look at the numbers. we'll go to the numbers.
This morning, with the Delta variant spreading like wildfire, the CDC finds more than 97% of patients hospitalized and nearly 100% of those who've died are unvaccinated. The president pleading with the public.
If you're vaccinated, you're not going to be hospitalized, you're not going to be in an ICU unit, and you're not going to die.
In Alabama, only about a third of the population is fully vaccinated. New cases up now 738% in the last 2 weeks. One doctor there going viral in an emotional Facebook post, writing of her patients who have passed away from COVID. One of the last things they do before they're intubated is beg me for the vaccine. I hold their hand and tell them that I'm sorry, but it's too late.
So, I follow this subreddit, I've talked about it before, called No New Normal, which it's kind of morphed over the months of what this subreddit is. And it used to be the fact that, like, yeah, people are dying, this exists, but I'm no wimp, and we have to get back to living our lives, and, like, why are you guys all living in fear? That's kind of how it started, it seemed.
Okay.
And now it is very much like the vaccine is a poison that was created on purpose to murder people and to, like, lower the population. You know, it's like, it's gotten insane. And so they, like everyone, including me, and, you know, we will pick and choose statistics and headlines that make us, what's it called? Something bias, confirmation bias.
Okay.
You know, it's like we want to believe something. So even if we say something like, well, you know, the fact checkers, they're all libtards and they're in on it, and, like, they're in the pockets of Pfizer and everything, whatever.
Yeah.
But, like, if one of the fact checkers comes out and says something that shows that the vaccines are causing people to die, or the vaccines aren't as helpful with, you know, keeping COVID patients down as they should be, or whatever, they go, aha, you see, and then they'll use that source to prove their point, right? That, like, you shouldn't take.
But the root of it is they're hypocrites. They're, like, picking and choosing the headlines from the exact same people, and depending on what they say, it's either I don't believe it or look at this.
Yes. And I bring that up, and I posted a few links that have either debunked some of the stuff that they were saying, or links that they have posted to prove a point. And one of them being, let me see if I can...
And you've put these in the description of
Yeah,
this
they're
video?
in the description on YouTube, so you can click on some of these links if you want. Like debunking the UK vaccinated COVID deaths link. From what I can tell, and again, maybe this source has been, you know, tainted by...
Because I'm not totally in tune with the news like I was 8 months ago, but it feels like the UK, they're saying a lot of people are dying with the vaccine. Is that the idea? Like, there's news stories about that, and the idea is maybe they're circumventing, or they're, what do you call it? They're having breakthrough cases where the Delta variant is killing people with the vaccine?
Yeah, and in fact...
That's not true, though. Is that what you're about
to... okay, so what they were saying, what people were saying online was that there was this very simple statistic, and I think this is the statistic, but I'm not exactly sure this is what they were pointing to, but I'm pretty sure this is what they were pointing to, and it said, in the United Kingdom, of the 117 people who died of the Delta variant, 43% of them had been fully vaccinated.
Yeah, what does that sentence mean? That sounds like 50% of the people died that had COVID.
Yes.
That had the vaccine.
Yes. And it does. I mean, it does mean that. But what this is saying is that some of the people that died also had only half vaccinations, right? So that kind of makes this even worse. If 43% of them were fully vaccinated, and I'm not sure I have the number in this article here.
But hold on, I still don't understand that sentence, because what Biden just said and what we've been told and what all the statistics say when you say the Pfizer vaccine is 90% effective, that is 90% effective of ever having anything more than a mild case.
Yes.
If you are in the 10% that is beyond that, it's not death or hospitalization. It's just the next level. It's like severe or middle level.
Yes.
But it's 0% deaths from COVID if you've been vaccinated. That sentence seems to be hinting at 50 people died that were fully vaccinated.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
And out of a number, if that was 50 people out of a million, you'd be like, statistically, it's still 0.
Yeah.
But it's out of 117. So what does that mean? Are people dying that have been fully vaccinated?
Yeah, and it seems like, at least in this small sample study from the United Kingdom, it does seem like it's really bad there compared to our numbers here in the States. And I don't know if they have more Delta variant there and it's a more severe Delta variant or whatever, but this article brings up the argument that 90% of the people in that area had been vaccinated. And that if 100% of the people had been, like let's say in a perfect world, every single person had been vaccinated, then 100% of the deaths would be vaccinated people, right?
Yeah.
So you're taking 90% who have been vaccinated, 10% who have not been vaccinated, and then you're pooling them together in a group and going, you see 50% of the people were vaccinated, so it's basically a flip of a coin. You might as well not get vaccinated.
So it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, of the 117 people who died of the Delta variant, they may have cut out thousands of other people that died as well, and they're just looking at 117, but in that selected group of 117, 43% of them had been vaccinated. But if we pulled out further and said, but let's look at the 80,000 people and keep those 117 in that 80,000, then our numbers would be skewed to being like it's less than 1%.
Well, I don't know exactly what you're saying right now.
I'm just saying, like, they've selectively chosen the 117 people to include in the study.
I don't know if they chose them.
That seems ridiculous that they would do that.
I think that is all of the people in the area that died.
So it's just a very strange population. It's like
I think it's a small amount of people, but within that area, wherever they found those 117 deaths, 90% of the population was already vaccinated. And this article is simply saying, yes, it's not as good as we would like the vaccine to be. However, we don't know how many of those 90% were, I don't know, infected with the, I don't know if infected is the right word, but they've come in contact with the Delta variant, and the vaccine saved them from ever having a single symptom, let alone dying, right? So maybe the vaccine is incredibly powerful.
That's what it seems like.
But, well, I don't know. These numbers specifically are a little tricky.
Yeah.
When you start, looking at the vast majority of people are vaccinated, but half the people who are dying are vaccinated, I don't exactly know how you figure that out. But there's one more really interesting article.
Do we know how many people have died from COVID for certain that have been vaccinated fully in the United States?
I wish I had that number.
Isn't it like 100? It's like statistically such a small amount of people, right?
I think it is. I think it's around like 1% of the current deaths.
Okay, so then do you change the way Pfizer, like, if they were all Pfizer, and they're not, they're all going to be Pfizer, Moderna, J&J, AstraZeneca, like there's going to be some mix of the population, but now suddenly there is like, you can't say 100% chance of not dying, which is what Biden just said, right?
Right, and I actually saw a fact check of Biden saying that, and it said, like, wrong.
There is a 1%.
You can still die if you're vaccinated. It's not 100%, and so that's fair.
The one thing I'm curious about is what is the science saying about vaccinated people who catch coronavirus, which was me. I got vaccinated. I went with the Johnson & Johnson single dose. I went 14 days or right at that time, and then I got, there's like thunder going on outside.
Yeah, we might be.
It's never storms here like that. Are people that are vaccinated and then catch coronavirus, are they getting a large enough viral load to then ever be able to spread that and become contagious? Because I thought the science was kind of hinting at it's so unlikely that you can be vaccinated. You could catch coronavirus, but you would never get sick enough to then be able to spread it to another person.
You could test positive, but you would probably not be contagious, is what I have read. But good Lord, we've been wrong about everything.
I'm curious to know if that's still...
Yeah, I don't know if we figured that out yet. Who knows if we'll ever figure that out. It's ridiculous. There's one other article that's kind of in the same vein that I just want to talk about, and then we can be done with this. It's the one about Israel, and the anti-vaxxers love these websites that point to this title, just the first half of it. Okay. So I found an article that kind of has the full title, and the full title is, Israel says Pfizer COVID vaccine is just 39% effective as Delta spreads, but still prevents severe illness. So I saw this article being spread around the internet yesterday.
What effective of what?
Exactly. But, you know, most people, including me, you just read a headline, you go, aha, it's only 39% effective.
People are dying that have Pfizer and they're going to the hospital. And
yes, but then you start actually looking at the numbers and it's like, no, you have a 39% chance of not catching anything or having no symptoms, but you have an 88% effectiveness against hospitalization and 91% effectiveness against severe illness. And then who knows what the number is against death.
Then who's responsible for this propaganda? Is it CNBC for writing a headline like that?
Well, CNBC's headline at least has the "but still prevents severe illness." The article.
But I kind of feel like one news agency wrote this headline, and then everyone else piggybacks on it, and then writes something very similar. Because I don't know how anyone would write the vaccine is just 39% effective. Like that just seems like not a way a data collector, scientist, or somebody would write an article like that.
I know.
Especially if it came from a legit source that wants people to get vaccinated.
Yeah.
They wouldn't write it in that way.
It does seem strange to me, but the anti-vaxxers love this stuff, but then it's like they don't read anything in the article that kind of disputes.
Here's one thing I've noticed, and I don't want to go on a tangent here, but I will begin to. I've kind of felt like when I go to CNN every day just to see what they're talking about. And I also go to Fox News to see what they're talking about. Fox News is like so political and so crazy what their headlines say that I'm like, it's always like gun violence in New York City makes it uninhabitable. And I'm like, all right, that can't be true. CNN, on the other hand, until the Olympics just started, if you go to CNN right now, it's about Olympics. 2 or 3 days ago, every title was about coronavirus and Donald Trump. And I was like, it sure feels like CNN is grasping at straws saying, we need viewership. We need coronavirus to still be a topic. And we still need Donald Trump, even though for the most part, he's been completely out of the news. Like I saw the other day a headline that had coronavirus and Donald Trump in the same headline on CNN. And I was like, it sure seems like they need these two events.
Yeah.
For like a month, CNN was really milking that whole building that collapsed in Miami, you know?
Yes.
The building falls down and they got the videos and new security camera and new inspectors' photos, and they milked that for a good 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But that story is pretty much done now. But we've gone back to coronavirus, and I'm seeing headlines like you're pointing out here where it just sounds like, oh my gosh, the world's about to come to an end. But then when you start looking at the numbers, which we're about to do here, there is a tick up. And I've been wrong before. I would say, it's a little tick up, and then all of a sudden it becomes like the biggest wave ever. But it just makes it sound like most of the country isn't vaccinated, and all these people that are not vaccinated are going to die. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. It's still only like a 1%, is it 1% chance of death? Or is it 0.8%?
Okay, so this is something interesting as well that I've done a little bit of research on. Everyone on the No New Normal subreddit loves spewing the number 99.8% survival rate.
Okay.
And
is that in the U.S.? Is that worldwide?
I don't know. I tried to research it last night, and I tried to research it today.
Scroll up here. Go to the U.S. because we could do this math real quick. I thought I did it, and it was surprisingly like 1% of people that catch COVID.
No, I'm pretty sure it's around 2%. 2% in the United States.
That's way higher than what we were talking about 8 months ago. Well, weren't we saying it's like 4 times, 10 times worse than the flu?
You can do it. It's 626,000 deaths divided by 35 million. I'm sorry. Yeah, 35 million cases. Is that the right direction?
1.78% of people who have had COVID have died from it.
Now,
that's a horrifying number.
Yeah, but that is obviously not true because...
You think the cases are higher?
Yeah, obviously the cases... Like, we know so many people who got it, knew they had it, never went and got tested. We know people who had to have had it but were asymptomatic, you know. So I would imagine, and I think even Fauci recently came out and said that you could safely double the number
of cases.
Double the number of cases.
Half that. And
yeah.
So now you're at like 0.8 or 0.9%.
Yeah. I still don't, like, I've never gotten to the 0.2% death rate. I can't figure out where that came from. But in some countries, the death rate is insane. I think Peru is the worst deaths per capita of any country on Earth. We can look at that in just one second. But I've got the United States pulled up here. So check out the this chart here. This is the daily new cases, and you can see we're spiking up to where we were back in April. 80,000 cases a day. We're at around 70,000 today.
I mean, look at that the change in velocity there, and compare that to like October 6th. I mean, it's kind of doing it's in a similar fashion. I think it's steeper than if you go back to June 24th. The second wave, like, it looks steeper than that little.
It's hard to compare it here because we probably didn't have much testing back here.
Yeah.
You know, but if we look at the deaths, like, obviously the deaths are going to trail behind the cases. So we're seeing just a barely little uptick in deaths right now.
It's plateaued though, for sure. It's not decreasing.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, we're moving up a little bit. But let's look at Peru real quick, because I was shocked. It's been so long since I've looked at these numbers, and then all of a sudden I sorted by deaths per 1 million population, and Peru was like way ahead of anything, which is so strange. Deaths per 1 million population. Yeah, here we go. So Peru has deaths per 1 million population of 5,849 deaths per 1 million people. And when you compare that to the United States, I mean, we're pretty bad. The United States is here. We're at 1,800.
So it's like 4 or 5 times as many?
Yeah, man, like, isn't that insane? And this, some of the numbers you could say, like, oh, the deaths per cases might be whacked out because they are doing a lot of testing or no testing at all or whatever, but, like, you can't really mess with the deaths per 1 million population number, you know? And I mean, I guess if you start doing, like, everyone who gets in a car wreck, put them as a COVID death. Everyone who commits suicide, put it as a COVID death. But even still, I mean, this number is so high compared to anywhere else in the world. I can't imagine you could attribute it to that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. It does feel like we're on some kind of tipping point. I made a post on Facebook the other day, and I knew it would be controversial.
Uh-oh.
But I didn't. All I said was, I kept reading these news articles that were like, the unvaccinated people are going to be the cause of all of this uptick.
Yeah.
And they're all going to die. And every unvaccinated person is going to catch COVID. This is so contagious now that if you're unvaccinated, there's no way you're going to go the next 6 months or year without catching it, right? And you need to get vaccinated. And some people were even going as far as saying the government needs to force you to be vaccinated.
Yeah.
I don't have any videos about kids, but, like, that's the next big story is, like,
yeah.
When will children get vaccinated? And people have very different opinions with kids under 12, like, because there are some side effects that actually would happen to infants and stuff.
There's side effects to me. That vaccine kicked my ass.
That was like a day or two, though. I'm talking long term. Like, kids are getting meningitis. Like, there's things that are causing long-term health problems. But anyway, the post that I wrote on Facebook was something like, why do we care what people choose to do with the vaccine?
I agree.
If we are 99.9% chance of survival, not being hospitalized, not dying from COVID because we've got vaccinated, and 50% of the population has decided to go that route, why should we care? Like, I still want to be compassionate for people, right? But I was kind of relating it to, like, why do I care if somebody's obese and they decide to continue to eat at McDonald's? Why do I really care? And this sounds really negative, like, why do I care? But, like, at what point do I just say, it's your choice?
Sure.
Why do you continue to smoke when you have high blood pressure and you might have emphysema? You know, like that's your choice to continue to smoke.
Yep.
If you choose not to get the vaccine, but we're all vaccinated and all the healthcare workers are vaccinated, yes, the healthcare workers are going to have to work hard and they're going to have to see you die. But their life is not in jeopardy like it was a year ago, right? We were worried about the healthcare workers. I'm kind of like, shouldn't we just open up and go back to normal and be like, look, if you're not going to listen to us, it's the same as if you're going to drive a car and not wear a seatbelt.
Yep.
You're taking that risk. And we have a good friend that went to Vegas with us who is in the boat of, I don't want to get the vaccine. And I care greatly about him. But deep down, I'm like, that's his choice. And if he decides not to get vaccinated, I can't be this, like, what do you call them, white knights? Who's like, you must get vaccinated or I can't be your friend. And like, you are responsible for... I just feel like at this point, we have a cure. Maybe the cure is going to have problems down the road, you know, like we're all going to wind up being infertile or something. Who knows? But I just wonder, like, why is it such a big deal? It was a big deal when we had no vaccines. When we were going to override the hospitals and we were going to get the healthcare workers COVID and we were going to kill grandma and like it was going to be bad. But we're way beyond that now.
I know.
To where I kind of just feel like it's your personal choice. And if you choose not to get it, I might not agree with you, but it's in the same boat as all of the other cases I just named, where I can't be like, the government needs to say we have to ban soda drinks because you are overweight and you're going to keep drinking, 200-calorie drinks. That feels weird and wrong to me.
The argument that I have recently heard, which I think is so minuscule, it's like when you do the abortion debate and then somebody's like, but what about incest? And you're like, come on, like that, like, are we talking about like 1/100th of 1% here? Are we talking about like
right.
99% of cases? And I've heard...
I think this is it. But many people can't get vaccinated, though.
There you go.
Is that your argument?
Yeah, that's what I've heard people say, is like many people can't get vaccinated. And I'm like, how many people is that? And then if that is true, what other vaccines can't you take? And then is it possible with a little bit more time for us to come up with a vaccine with fewer symptoms,
Well, somebody made this argument on my Facebook post, and I'm like, I'm one of those people. A lot of people would say you shouldn't get vaccinated because you're on an immune suppressant drug, and you're on Humira, you should not go get vaccinated. I even think maybe in the questionnaire it mentions something about it. I've done the research, and it seems like with my drug, Humira, it might make my autoimmune system weaker, and therefore either the vaccine's not going to be quite as effective, or, if I get coronavirus, I'm going to die because I got coronavirus and my body can't handle it. Or it's like this drug actually blocks part of the pathway. And there's articles you can find where they're like, maybe Humira has a mechanism in it that prevents COVID from ever becoming deadly in patients that take this drug. And so in my case, I was like, I'm autoimmune compromised. I still got the vaccine. I still got COVID.
But maybe there are some people who
legit can't get it. They're on like some kind of chemo and it's way worse than the drug I'm on.
Sure.
I'm just saying my drug is in the same category. So I fit in this bucket. But what is the argument that they would be safe if 98% of the population got vaccinated? Because that would be a legit concern. If you couldn't get the vaccine, but I can and I choose not to, my interaction with you might allow me to give you the virus.
Yeah.
And then you die.
Yeah.
So then you could be mad at me for saying, I don't want to get it.
Potentially.
But this goes back to the question I had before. If vaccinated people can still pass the virus on, and I don't know that they can, but it seems like that's where the news is trying to push this story. Like, just because you're vaccinated doesn't mean you can go out to public. And I'm like, I think you can. You can't give the virus because you never have the load. But if you do have the viral load to be able to do that, then everyone is responsible for giving the person who can't get vaccinated the virus potentially.
That's very true. I don't know. I mean, you could make the argument that somebody on chemo could be killed by somebody who didn't wash their hands and, had a cold,
Yeah.
So it's like, are we going to start mandating hand washing? Is there going to be like cops in the bathroom?
This is way more contagious than...
Well, okay. So I saw a quote, and I didn't see this come out of Fauci's mouth, but I think it was a legitimate quote where Fauci, and I think it's in one of the links in the description that I posted, where Fauci himself said he believes that COVID-19 is 10 times more deadly than the flu. But is that bad? Like, if I could go back in time before all of this and say, like, Patrick, you know the flu every year? And you're like, yeah. And I go,
Heard of it, yeah. Some
do
people
you
die.
do you get the flu vaccine? And you're like, no, I don't do that. And I'm like, what if I told you this year there's a flu that's 10 times worse? Would you be like, well, we'd have to shut down the whole world economy? or would you be like, oh, but, you know, maybe I'd consider getting the vaccine this year?
Yeah, it does 10 times worse. Is that one of these like mind games where like you look at a billion and then a trillion and our mind can't comprehend like the difference there? And 10 times really is a huge leap. And I would be naive in being like, oh, it's only 10 times.
I don't think it's like to the power of 10. I think just it's like 10 times.
So you add a 0 to it?
2 zeros.
2 zeros. That's pretty big. So
yeah.
if 100,000 people die in a year from the flu, you'd add 2 zeros to that?
I guess.
And that's what, 1 million?
I think so.
I don't, I mean, yeah, maybe I would still be like...
2 million. I can't do math live on the air. But I'm just saying, if something that we don't care anything about, like no one is afraid of the flu at all, and then I say,
maybe that's 2
but
million.
this one is 10 times worse flu.
Yeah.
I can't imagine you jump from like, I do nothing to let's shut down the entire world for over a year. I can't imagine anyone would jump to that conclusion based on that. Anyway. That being said, I still don't know. I think what's going to happen is over time, this is going to get behind us. The masks will slowly fade away. You know, it's just, even the most hardcore people right now, they're just going to see no one wearing a mask, and eventually they're going to... And then years from now, we're going to look back, and maybe it will be wrong, but I think we'll look back and just go like, wow, we really overreacted to that one. Not because human life isn't valuable and all these things, but just because we're not living in it when we can look back in hindsight and we can just kind of like, we don't have to look in fear anymore. And we can just go, man, 10 times worse flu, like that.
Play the video because we can just talk a little bit. There's nothing exciting to really show here. It's not even our video, but play, I think 8. Just play 8. There's really no sound, but we went to my bachelor party, and we went to this Dave Chappelle show in Vegas, and this is what it looked like in seats that we could not afford. But this arena, the MGM, was like 20,000 people, and they gave masks out to everybody.
Yeah.
And then they said, we encourage you to wear the masks when you can, or some vague statement like that.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're with Mike Kelly, who's from LA.
Yeah.
And so he's wearing the mask everywhere, you know, and I'm like, Mike, you've been vaccinated. And then he finally gets into the arena.
He was wearing a mask?
He was wearing a mask when he showed up to Vegas. Not to call you out, Mike, but...
Was he?
He was wearing a mask. And then we get in, and then it kind of like the mask slipped away, much like it does at weddings, you know, after a couple cocktails. But then he would put the mask back on to go to the bathroom. And I'm like, Mike, what do you... Like, you're in this arena, which is the worst place you could be, but then you're going to put the mask back on when you go to the urinal. Like, it seemed kind of strange.
I mean, we walked all through the casino and played craps and we played blackjack.
But we saw Chappelle kind of early on. It was like the first night.
But so over the course of your bachelor party, he just lost the mask completely.
Right.
Okay.
But all I say this, and we were also with somebody who was like, I'm not getting the vaccine.
Yep.
And they were talking about the Lambda variant, although now the Delta variant is the main variant. Anyway, the whole point is we went to Vegas. We were in the casinos. We were at Dave Chappelle. We were around 20,000 people. We were around so many people. Nobody caught coronavirus. The unvaccinated guy didn't catch it. Everything seemed totally normal. If there was one place that would be a horrible place for this to be breaking out, it would be in Vegas, because then everyone goes back and spreads. I don't know if you're able to pull up Nevada's numbers and see how bad it is there. It surely would be ticking up. Maybe it's not representative because all those people are transient and they're leaving and they're not in Vegas, but it was just weird to be in Vegas where the pandemic, the only way you knew the pandemic even occurred was the dealers had masks on, I believe. Or did they even not have masks? Were we talking to the blackjack people and they didn't have masks on, or they did?
I thought they did have masks on. So here is Nevada. And what percentage of Nevada is
Locals or
Vegas?
I would imagine the majority of it.
Really?
You think the rural areas are so like there's got to be so few
I don't know.
people.
Vegas is so small, you know, and like obviously it's compact, but it's very small. But you know,
I mean, I drove from LA to Vegas, and there is nothing out there. Like we stopped at some like alien beef jerky place, which was the only place for like an hour that you could stop and get food.
Yeah.
And its population has to be like 4,000 people. It's just like nothing out there.
Yeah.
I would imagine most of the people live in Vegas. You know, or the surrounding areas of Vegas.
Yeah.
So they have a pretty good tick right there at the end. I mean, I feel like we've been gone long enough to know that none of us got it there.
Well, it was funny. So I went from Vegas to Florida for like a family reunion with Katie's family, and then I went to North Carolina to see my brother and his new baby and everything, and I started getting a sore throat. And you know, we went through this like 10 times during last year, where it's like every little symptom you feel, you're like, oh, this is it, I'm gonna die, it's over, you know, and I'm spreading it to every one of my loved ones or whatever.
But everyone's vaccinated.
Well,
except the baby.
Like my baby's not, their new
babies.
baby's not, and then my sister-in-law is not because
she was pregnant.
She was pregnant and just had a baby, so she's going to get vaccinated, but she just hasn't gotten around to it yet because she just had a baby a few weeks ago. So I was like, oh my gosh, like what if I give it to her? But it was all in my head, and my sore
But this
throat
is what
went
I
away.
went back to. This is so important, and I feel like we should all know this. If you're vaccinated and you happen to have caught coronavirus in Vegas, but you're vaccinated, are you capable of giving it to the 1 or 2 people in your little community that are not vaccinated? Do you have enough of a load? Because when I got coronavirus, it was so mild compared to Kristen. Like I wasn't really coughing. I never had the fever. I had horrible headaches, and I felt like I didn't have clarity, and I didn't feel like I could work, you know. And I was like, I just want to sleep this off. But I don't know that I was ever able to actually infect somebody else. And I thought that was an argument for getting the vaccine. That it's going to save you, but it's also maybe impossible or very unlikely for you to then be able to spread it to others because you'll never get the load needed to become contagious. So if that's true, and I think we should all know the answer to that now, like it should be common knowledge, that's what headlines should be, then I don't know that you'd have anything to worry about.
Yeah, and that gave me some peace that like Rand Paul says I should.
Here's another little rant I want to go on with this.
Okay.
So we're in Vegas. We're around hundreds of thousands of people without masks, right?
Yes.
We're in a venue with 20,000, and then we go out and we gamble and we go to the clubs and we shoot guns and we do all the Vegas stuff, right? We're following CDC guidelines. The CDC says at every restaurant and store and everywhere you go, you do not have to wear a mask if you've been vaccinated. But then you go to the airport, and I'm guessing the airport has 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people there. Way less than the city of Vegas with all the casinos and all the hoopla. And it's the second you get in the airport, the masks are required now. And I'm like, why are we following the CDC's guidelines everywhere else in America? But the second we get to the airport, it's like, we're not going to follow the science. We are going to make everyone wear the mask. Is it just being overly protective? Because it seems like I'm around a whole lot less people in the airport. I get it. I'm in a tube flying in the air. But I was just in a venue with 20,000 people and nobody cared at all. So it just seems really strange that our government has said...
you have to wear the mask in the tube flying through the air until it's snack time.
And then you take it off and you eat.
Yes. So...
Isn't this weird, though, that like our flying is the one area where the masks have to be... Like, I felt weird. I was like, man, I forgot what it's like to have the humidity in my breath and everything all in my face because I'm running around Vegas with no care in the world.
I know.
And I'm following the CDC guidelines.
Yep.
But the second I get back to the airport, it's like, no. And I remember I sat at the food court. This is in Houston, I think. Maybe it was in Chicago. And I'm eating. And then I'm like, I'm just going to stay here because in this spot, I cannot wear the mask and I can just play on the phone. I stay there for 2 hours because flying right now is insane. There's so many delays and like staffing problems. It's really weird. And so then I just get up, grab my backpack and walk. And I start walking. And all of a sudden I realize like, man, people are kind of looking at me. And I'm like, I don't have my mask on, and I'm walking through the middle of the
man.
airport, right?
You could have infected the whole place.
But then I look, and I'm like, but nobody cares about that guy sitting down with the Starbucks. He's
know.
good, but I'm the enemy because I've been sitting in a cafeteria for 2 hours with no mask, and I decided to get up and walk down. It was just weird, and I was like, this is so strange that we care about wearing a mask in this one part of the airport, but not when you're sitting with your drink. And
I agree. It is really stupid.
all right, are we about to move on to like the featured image? Because
please, we're gonna skip number 2.
I mean, we could play a few of these. These are all just like how bad Delta is and what's going on.
The U.S. could be seeing the start of a 4th wave of the coronavirus. More than 52,000 new cases were reported Wednesday. That means infections have more than tripled in the last month. The Delta variant is driving the summer surge, and the head of the CDC warns it's, quote, more aggressive and much more transmissible than previous strains. Meanwhile, vaccinations have plummeted since the April peak. The country is now averaging fewer than 400,000 doses per day. Less than 50% of the population is fully vaccinated. And now the NFL is pressuring its players to roll up their sleeves. David Begnaud is in Louisiana with more. David?
Right after the NFL made that announcement, a player for the Seattle Seahawks came out and said, I just went and got vaccinated because I don't want to hurt my team. The NFL has told players you must be vaccinated by the time the season starts on September the 9th. Tonight, a warning from the NFL to its teams. If there's a COVID outbreak and players are not vaccinated, prepare to forfeit and lose the game. The league has tried to get players immunized. 78% have gotten at least 1 dose. The NFL commissioner sent out a memo saying that any team which causes a game to be canceled will be responsible for financial losses, and players on both teams won't get paid.
They're hoping as players begin to report to training camp this week into next week that they'll start getting vaccinated so that they can meet that sort of threshold that they've all set for one another, around 85% or so for all teams.
So this is 2 interesting news stories. First of all, like they're making the NFL players get vaccinated. I mean, I don't know how risky that is. We've already gone through college football. We've gone through the NFL. In the peak of the pandemic with no vaccine, it doesn't seem like it was that bad, right? Like,
what are you talking about?
I'm just saying we had college sports and we had an NFL season,
sure.
And no one was vaccinated before the Super Bowl.
Okay.
And it wasn't that horrible. You know, I guess the danger is in the locker rooms, but like on the field, it just doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But now it's like, you got to get vaccinated or you're going to forfeit your whole game and we're going to like not pay you your salary. I mean, I guess they can do that because it's their company.
It makes a little more sense in that scenario to me. It's like, trying to think of another situation, you know, like maybe if you were working on some super expensive movie or something and you were like, listen, if you're going to work on this movie, like we got to get it done in the next 30 days. We have to have everyone vaccinated because if you get sick,
you ruin the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's like we have to shut this game down and we're going to lose out on hundreds of millions of dollars or whatever. Like we just can't do it. So that makes a little more sense to me than forcing every citizen to do it. But I don't know.
Well, the second story is LA is now reintroducing the mask mandate.
Oh, you know they love it. Those soy boys out
some
there.
Of the numbers. Today was the 7th consecutive day that we have seen new cases.
Man, remember when you used to wear a mask and a face shield together?
I do. Back when I was so responsible. Now I don't even know where that face shield is.
I'm going to get you another one for extra safety.
Virus here in Los Angeles County, over 1,000. In fact, today that number was 1,537. The number of hospitalizations have also increased. Hospitals like Cedars-Sinai, where I am today, have seen their number of hospitalized COVID patients double and sometimes triple. The trends are going in the wrong direction. And they say that in Los Angeles County right now, 99% of the people that have been hospitalized or are in the hospital right now are because they are unvaccinated. They also say that people who have only had 1 vaccination may not be protected from the new Delta variant. That Delta variant is twice as contagious as the original coronavirus that we saw first come to Los Angeles a year and a half ago. Those who aren't vaccinated are getting it quite quickly, and they are spreading it even faster than that.
Like you said, if 99% of the people in the hospital are unvaccinated, like that is their choice.
Yeah.
It is free.
That's kind of how I feel.
Yeah, so take the mask
off. But I
off.
still see friends of ours, you know, photographer friends of ours on Facebook, and they're just like hitting the vaccination thing. And I'm like, aren't we at a point when like everyone's chosen the way they're going to believe? Like, has anybody not heard of the vaccine or has not had the opportunity to get it? Like, maybe there's a chance like, oh, one of my good friends said I should get it, and you know what, I'm going to listen to him. Like, there's influence.
Maybe.
Peer pressure. But at this point, it's just weird to watch these people like make it their goal and like, I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna double down. I'm only gonna do photo shoots with a mask now because and I'm just like, isn't it people's choice now to get vaccinated or not?
There may be people out there that are so disconnected, maybe in a bad way, but maybe also in a good way, that they just go out and live their life and they don't watch the news and they don't read the headlines because they just don't care about anything political. They don't care, they're not afraid of anything. They're just going out and living their life, and maybe there's more of those people than we think, and they're not on social media.
And they could be influenced, is that what you're saying?
Maybe they're just like, oh yeah, vaccine, like I've heard of it, like do I need to do that? And like maybe if they just heard the one story about somebody their age dying or what, like that's enough to push them to do it. I don't know. There's a story, the stories of the federal agents or something, like going door to door and trying to convince people to get vaccinated or whatever. Yeah. It's a little creepy on one hand, but on the other hand, I'm like,
it's the least they could do.
Well, no, I mean, somebody brought up the good point. They were like, why don't we do this for pedophiles? Like if we have the resources to go door to door to every door in America, we might be able to accomplish better things than like convincing people to get vaccinated, but whatever. I don't know. I'm kind of, you guys know me. I'm like a fence sitter on almost every possible topic. I'm like, oh, I see both sides. All right, lab leak theory gains momentum.
Well, the issue of where the pandemic began and how it began has never really gone away, but it's back center stage because US intelligence officials are now redoubling efforts to investigate the origins of COVID-19. The orders come from President Biden. Here's the statement. It says the intelligence community is split on whether the virus came from human contact with an infected animal or emerged in a laboratory accident. You've probably heard the laboratory theory before, is that the virus emerged from here, the Institute of Virology in Wuhan. This is one of China's top virus research labs, and we already know that the city became the first epicenter of the virus, but the questions are, where did it originally come from? Some believe the lab is where it started. Here's the White House spokesperson, Karine Jean-Pierre, on this new investigation.
The President is asking the U.S. intelligence community, in cooperation with other elements of our government, to redouble efforts to collect and analyze information that could bring the world closer to a definitive conclusion on the origin of the virus and deliver a report to him again in 90 days.
There's not any more to this that's important, is there?
I mean, I made this long just because they go through and outline a lot of different things. A lot of it was for me to remember, like, what's going on, but...
Should I hit play?
You hit play a little
Well, let's work through what we do know about the origins of COVID. Scientists largely agree it came from animals. It's thought most likely that that animal was a bat. That was the case with the SARS virus, and either it was transferred directly from a bat to humans or via an intermediary animal. We also know in February 2020, a group of 27 prominent public health scientists published this letter saying, we stand together to strongly condemn conspiracy theories suggesting that COVID-19 does not have a natural origin. The conspiracy theory they're referring to is one that the virus was man-made or was engineered in this Wuhan lab. We're not going to talk about that today. There's no evidence that took place. What we do know is that recent coronaviruses have emerged in humans that originally originated in animals. We mentioned SARS, connection to bats. Then there was MERS, which is thought to have come from camels. And that jump from animal to human can happen naturally. Professor Dale Fisher says it remains the most likely explanation.
The evidence about a more natural species jump is that this is how it's happened for centuries, especially over the last 40 or 50 years, that viruses mutate and they jump species, and we just haven't found that link yet.
But let's be clear, so far efforts to discover the natural source of COVID-19 have failed. So let's look at the laboratory leak theory in a bit more detail and how it's being investigated in the US. At the beginning, China said the virus originated here, a wet market in Wuhan. It said the virus probably jumped from wildlife in the market to humans. Now, though, that's not thought to be the most likely explanation because many of the first reported cases had no known links to the market, which brings us to Wuhan's virology lab. We know the lab studies coronaviruses by collecting bats from around China. At the start of the pandemic, one Chinese scientist wrote that the virus probably originated from a laboratory in Wuhan, but that report was then removed. Then in 2020, the Washington Post reported that 2 years before the pandemic, US officials visited the lab and sent official warnings back to Washington about inadequate safety. The theory is that while carrying out studies, a human in the lab was accidentally infected with the virus. Professor Ravi Gupta picks up the story.
So this is just recapping where we have been with all of this, right?
Yep.
We still do not know where the virus came from.
And how, if it did come from a bat to a pangolin or whatever, like, how would we ever find that 2 years later?
I don't know, but I've heard people making arguments on podcasts. Like, I have a couple Joe Rogan podcasts here where he invites people that were in the investigation or were investigative journalists in the White House, like people very deep into this that know all these players. And they were saying, like, all of these other cases that they mentioned where the viruses, you know, jump from animal to humans, if this happened in some remote area of the world or remote area of China where they were doing research, you would expect that that jump would happen, and then there would be like a bread trail of people got infected all the way back to Wuhan, because as it was being transported, maybe through airlines or through trains or through vehicle, like it wouldn't have just been like we found this virus in this jump here in a cave, and then suddenly it's in Wuhan and there's nothing going on among the transportation system that would allow that to move, right? You would expect like little outbreaks here and there. So a lot of people make the argument that it sure looks like the jump happened in Wuhan in the lab or near the lab, because wouldn't it have happened at the place where it went from bat to pangolin? And I guess their argument is, well, it happened in the wet market. But just like they explained there, there's a lot of people that weren't affiliated with the wet market at all that still got the virus. And so we're going to get into this whole Fauci thing, but Joe Rogan had a guy on, and I think I have a clip of this. His name's Josh Rogan. And it's really interesting. If you've never watched the Joe Rogan podcast, listen to this one, the Josh Rogan podcast from Joe Rogan. He goes through and he just explains like how they did this weird botched investigation, and they basically told people that were paid. They're like involved in that whole community to do your own investigation. It'd be like, we think Fstoppers are doing fraudulent activity. Lee Morris, why don't you report to us what you find in your own business? And you'd be like, I'm finding no evidence of fraud. And they're like, why would you go to you? Like your whole reputation is based on this, right?
Well, we should show the clip.
You could try to show the clip. I don't know how much he draws it all out, but you could try to play it back.
Well, we've got another incredibly generous super chat from Steve Robertson, $50. Thank you so much.
Money man, Steve Robertson.
Yeah, this guy's always giving the biggest super chats. He says, will either of you get a booster vaccination when they are available? Great to see another coronavirus journal.
I mean, I'm already balls deep into this, so I don't know why I wouldn't continue to get the vaccine if I've already got the dose.
You're going to be like glowing with radioactivity. You have the vaccine, you've got the natural immunities, yeah, and then you're going to do the booster as well. You're going to become like, Superman.
I mean, when I got COVID 4 months ago, the doctor here was kind of saying he thinks there's going to be booster shots and that we're going to be getting these for years. And there was some news about Johnson & Johnson or Pfizer saying we think we need to give a booster shot. And then the U.S. government came in and said, we do not think that's necessary. It's almost like they were butting heads a little bit. But it's starting to feel a little bit more like we might need a booster shot, if nothing else, for some variants that might be able to jump and break through the current vaccine. I have no problem getting it. I mean, I got the first vaccine. I will continue to get them. I've always made the argument that if there is something wrong with the vaccines and we all have long-term health problems or we die prematurely or whatever, I am in the boat with half of the world. It will be the biggest catastrophe mankind has ever made. And at that point, I'm okay being part of the group that doesn't make it. Like
this clip will be played back at your funeral. You're like, they're all dying, so that's fine.
But everyone at my funeral is going to be dying too because they all got the vaccine.
That's a good point.
If it was, a rare thing, and it's like the Humira I'm on has a black label and all these crazy warnings. If something happened with that, you'd be like, man, I wish I didn't take that drug.
Yeah.
Maybe I could have made it through with Crohn's disease in a different way, But when half the world is getting vaccinated, or that's the goal. Half of Americans are vaccinated, maybe not with my exact vaccine, although mine's the more traditional one, the one you and I got. It's not the mRNA.
I recently heard a doctor, and I wish I remember the details, but he was saying that he felt like the Johnson & Johnson vaccine was doing more in your body in terms of like changing cell dynamics or something than the mRNA vaccine. And he kind of explained it, but I don't remember a thing, so I probably shouldn't have even brought this up.
The one that we got was the more traditional science.
Potentially, but he was making some point that, like, if there was one to be afraid of, it would be the Johnson & Johnson one, and that the Pfizer one is actually safer. I don't remember.
I mean, this was the argument that Dave Chappelle was making. I got the Johnson & Johnson, which is the, I mean, he used a lot of derogatory words, but he was like, that's the one of course I would take, is the one that's the one shot and done. And but, you know, I feel like, yes, would you get a booster shot to answer the question? You would, right?
Yeah, I guess. I don't feel like it would consume me like getting the first. You know,
that was a big deal.
I was like, man, how can I get to the front of the line? Like I was doing research about who was giving it out and what age is allowed to get it and when am I old enough to get it, you know.
Yeah.
But if the boosters come out next week, I'm not going to be first in line to get the boost. Not because I'm afraid of it. I just, like, I feel like I don't care about this anymore. I'm done.
Yeah. You could try to do the Josh Rogan one.
Hire the best friends of the lab to investigate the lab.
Right.
It's like hiring Robert Kardashian to investigate OJ. You know what I mean? It's like, and when they interview these guys on TV, they always say the same thing. Don't you want the best friends of the lab to interview the lab? Isn't that, we know the most about it. We're doing the research. It would be like Robert Kardashian being like, I know OJ really well. You know, let me do the investigation. I'll figure out the truth. I'll get to the bottom of this.
Right.
So anyway, so they go to the lab for 3 hours, talk to their best friends, look them straight in the eye. Did you do it? No, we didn't do it. Okay, case closed. And then they concluded in their WHO report that the lab theory was very unlikely. We don't need to look into the lab. Case closed. And everybody was like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. We can't have that. These guys have a conflict of interest. Their careers are tied to this lab. If the lab were found to be guilty, again, we don't know. I don't know. You don't know. Peter Daszak doesn't know. Well, maybe he knows, but I don't think he knows. You know, their legacy, this entire project of $200 million rather, to dig up viruses all over the world would be kaput. It would have to necessarily be stopped, this whole industry. Okay, now here's the part where I'm going to get a little controversial. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Is it okay?
Sure.
Okay, so if I've gotten you that far, again, just to say that I don't blame anyone out there for having this notion that, like, this lab accident theory is kind of a kooky thing that, like, was cooked up by Mike Pompeo or something like that. I get why you think that. But now he's not here anymore, right? We don't have to argue about Trump anymore, hopefully, ever again, right? And we can just look at the piles of circumstantial evidence, and there's plenty of circumstantial evidence that it could have come. There's some circumstantial evidence that it could have come from nature. I feel that the lab theory has more compelling circumstantial evidence because, again, they were doing that kind of research. There was a huge cover-up, and the virus database went mysteriously offline somehow in December 2019.
There's also the evolution of the virus itself, right?
That's what Robert Redfield, who was the CDC director at the time, a trained virologist, he says, I took a look at this virus, and I concluded that it's so powerful that it must have been evolved in a lab setting. And he pointed to the gain-of-function research, and they called him a racist and a conspiracy theorist and all the rest.
Yeah.
All right. Now, here's the controversial part. The godfather of that industry, the head of the pyramid, is a guy you may have heard of called Anthony Fauci.
I've heard of that guy.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you want to hear more?
Yeah.
Okay.
So he goes on and on about how Fauci has, you know, gotten all this money from the NIH and put it in there, and this whole, you know,
gain of function
stuff, which is what we're about to get into.
Gain of function.
Gain of function, which is what we're talking about, and it's the idea of, like, genetically modifying viruses to make them more potent and more deadly, so that we can hopefully know more about them, and the idea is to prevent them. That's where this whole next debate comes in with Fauci and Rand Paul.
Dr. Fauci, knowing that it is a crime to lie to Congress, do you wish to retract your statement of May 11th where you claimed that the NIH never funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement. This paper that you are referring to was judged by qualified staff up and down the chain as not being gain of function.
So
let me finish.
You take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans,
right.
You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah, that is correct. And Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly. And I want to say that officially. You do not know what you are talking about. Okay, you get one person.
Let's read from the NIH definition of gain of function. This is your definition that you guys wrote. It says that scientific research that increases the transmissibility among mammals is gain of function. They took animal viruses that only occur in animals, and they increased their transmissibility to humans. How you can say that is not gain of function?
It is not.
It's a dance, and you're dancing around this because you're trying to obscure responsibility for 4 million people dying around the world from a pandemic.
And let's listen, Dr. Fauci.
I have to, well, now you're getting into something. If the point that you are making is that the grant that was funded as a sub-award from EcoHealth to Wuhan created SARS-CoV-2. That's where you are getting. Let me finish.
We don't know.
Well,
we don't
wait
know
a minute.
If it did come from the lab, but all the evidence is pointing that it came from the lab, and there will be responsibility for those who funded the lab, including yourself.
I totally
This committee will allow the witness to respond.
I totally resent the lie that you are now...
Why does this guy have like the Purell wipes and... Like it looks like a SNL set or something.
He's like ready to just be like
squirt.
Propagating, Senator, because if you look at the viruses that were used in the experiments, that were given in the annual reports, that were published in the literature, it is molecularly impossible.
No one's saying those viruses caused it. No one is alleging that those viruses caused the pandemic. What we're alleging is that gain-of-function research was going on in that lab, and NIH funded it.
That is
you can't
not...
get away from it. It meets your definition, and you are obfuscating the truth.
I'm not obfuscating the truth. You're the one.
Time is expired, but I will allow the witness to...
Let me just finish. I want everyone to understand that if you look at those viruses, and that's judged by qualified virologists and evolutionary biologists, those viruses are molecularly impossible to result in SARS-CoV-2.
Those viruses caused the pandemic. We're saying they are gain-of-function viruses because they were animal viruses that became more transmissible in human, and you funded it.
And you
admit the truth.
And you implying...
Senator Paul, your time has expired, and I will allow witnesses who come before this committee to respond.
And you are implying that what we did was responsible for the deaths of individuals. I totally resent that. And if anybody is lying here, Senator, it is you.
When you watch that, like, obviously this should be left for professionals to really debate, like, what's going on here. But where do you, I mean, you can see both arguments here.
I was really hoping that you had done a little bit more research on this, because I tried to look into it when this happened. When did this happen? A few days ago?
Yeah.
And
I mean, they've been arguing. I don't know why he's in front of Congress. Like, I don't know the bigger, broader story, why Fauci is. Is there an investigation going on, or is this part of Biden saying we're going to double down and investigate this whole thing a little bit more? I think they said they had 90 days to kind of like look into it more.
I have no idea.
What seems to be happening here is Fauci is saying the research that we were doing could have never led to the outbreak of COVID-19. But what Rand Paul is saying is we don't know the answer to that yet, but what you were doing was against what Obama had outlawed and said we will not let gain of function research to go on. And so what Rand Paul is saying is what you were doing was already illegal, or you were doing stuff that was supposed to have been banned. But the other guy Fauci is arguing like what you're pointing at with the research paper could have never turned into COVID-19. And so in a way, it's like they're arguing different points, but it kind of feels like, in my opinion, Rand Paul has the more valid argument. What you were doing may not have ever caused all of this, but what you were doing was under the radar and against what the White House had set as a policy years ago, and that type of research is what was responsible potentially for this. We do not know the answers to a lot of this stuff yet. It hasn't been fleshed out, but to watch them go back and forth, in my mind, I watch that, and it does feel like Fauci is being incredibly defensive. And I would understand, like you would too, if you were put in that position, you know. But
I do have to, first of all, Leonard just gave a super chat, and he says, by the way, it's not a pelican, it's a pangolin. Did I say pelican?
Have we said pelican?
I've never said pelican.
If we did, I
meant pangolin.
Maybe
I know
said
what
pelican.
a pangolin is, and I know it was pangolin.
Maybe I said pelican, but pangolin.
yeah, pangolin. I do want to point out, though, that do you remember a few weeks or a few months ago when Rand Paul went at Fauci and he was like, why are you wearing a mask when you're vaccinated? And he was like, because it's the safe thing to do. And he was like, no, this is theater.
Yeah.
and you doing this as, you're just acting like this does
You're
something.
giving
when
no
you
incentive
know it
for
does
people
not.
to get vaccinated if we still have to wear masks.
Yeah, and he was like, how could you say this about me, blah, blah, blah. And then it was like a day or two later, the CDC comes out and was like, okay, you don't have to wear masks anymore.
Yeah.
So in that case, Rand Paul was right. I mean, obviously it doesn't prove that this is right. And I don't even know. I wish Fauci was a little bit more, maybe he had a little bit more time to explain, because he was saying this is not gain of function, and what was done here could not have produced the virus.
Right.
And Rand Paul's like, I'm not saying that this produced the virus. I'm saying you did do gain of function, and when we look at your definition, that's exactly what you did. And he's like, well, our people have looked over it, and it is not gain of function. But when I go on Fox News and I look at this and I hear the pundits talk about it, they're all like, Rand Paul's right and Fauci's lying and blah, blah, blah. But when I try to go over to CNN, I couldn't find an expert sticking up for Fauci. I heard a few of them talking about like how crazy Rand Paul is, and he's not a real doctor and he doesn't know what he's talking about.
But they don't go into the details to explain like why what Fauci is saying is actually correct. What's strange about all of this is the policy, from my little understanding of this, the policy that was set forth to say, as a world, I believe, or at least as the United States, we should not be funding this type of research, came from the right's biggest enemy, which is President Obama, right? So President Obama was the one saying, we should not be doing this, let's put a ban to it. And then suddenly now, in a weird twist of fate, Obama's policies are like the chant of the Republicans being like, Fauci went against what we had approved, or, like what we had banned, and now he's the one responsible for all this.
Yeah.
I mean, it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be black and white. It should be that, hey, was that the policy? Is that the right thing to do? The next video I have goes back to Joe Rogan with two different commentators. I think they used to be journalists for The Hill. They talk about this a little bit as well.
And this is the theory, but the thing about the lab leak and why I actually want to deculture. You had Josh Rogan on, and he did an excellent job.
Really good job.
That guy's amazing. What he expertly shows is if this is true, the lab leak hypothesis is true. Yes, the Chinese covered it up. Guess what? The Chinese are liars, and they covered up SARS, and they've covered up basically everything that's come out of their country for the last 30 years. That's not a shocker. The shocker is Dr. Anthony Fauci, 2017, reverses the ban on gain-of-function research, directs this funding to EcoHealth Alliance, Dr. Peter Daszak, who then gives it to the Wuhan Institute of Virology for the study of novel bat coronaviruses. And then when the pandemic turns around, we take Dr. Peter Daszak as the only American to join the World Health Organization's investigation team into whether coronavirus leaked from a lab. And on 60 Minutes, I forget who was interviewing him. She goes, well, wait, so how did you verify it? Did you just ask them? And he goes, well, what else can we do? Because he's also half British. And that's how he goes, well, what else can we do? Oh, we could read emails. We could also see that Peter Daszak, as of 2 days ago, has been caught lying. He said there were no live bats inside of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Sky News Australia just revealed 2017 video that bats were present inside the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and the deputy director says, before this, China had no experience in BSL-4 laboratory. That's the highest level safety for a laboratory, but we have been here, and I don't want to misquote him, but he said something along the lines of creating new viruses, synthesizing new viruses. And what Fauci and Dr. Shi, who's the head of the Wuhan Institute of Virology, they're playing fucking games. Fauci and Rand Paul, when Rand Paul was pressing him, he was like, we did not fund gain-of-function research. He's trying to define it as explicitly what is on the record as him funding. Dr. Shi is the same thing. We were not doing gain-of-function research.
So this is amazing. I don't know if you caught. She did an email interview with the New York Times, which was mostly, it was just, the standard like state party line from China. But they asked her about gain-of-function research, and I'm sure your listeners mostly know that gain-of-function research is basically modifying these to see how can we make these pathogens more dangerous, right? And it's in and of itself very dangerous because these things do leak from labs relatively routinely. And she says, we were not doing gain-of-function research because what we were doing wasn't making it more virulent or dangerous. It was seeing if it could jump from species to species. I'm sorry, isn't that like the definition of making it more dangerous for us? Seeing if you can make it jump into our species? Like, that seems like that's pretty dangerous. So they're trying to play these games saying it's not technically gain-of-function research.
So maybe that was the question that I had, was how could he say it's not gain of function?
It seems like he should have given some very specific definition and gone deeper. And maybe that's impossible when you have someone like Rand Paul yelling at you.
I know, yeah.
But it feels like it's all hinging around this. And I don't know. The other thing that the Josh Rogan podcast his interview said that was really interesting to me was how a year ago, and you could go back to our shows and watch this, how a year ago the idea that this came from a lab in China was like a conspiracy theory set by Trump, and only crazy conspiracy theorists, Republicans, believe it. But now that Trump's out of office, and all these tweets have been sent out, people are like, Trump is a racist, and it is not coming from the, the Wuhan laboratory. Now you move forward, and it's like, wait a minute. The government, including Biden, are saying like there's a 50-50 chance that it came from nature or it came from the lab, and we need to investigate the lab a little bit more. And it's starting to like pan out, in my opinion, it's starting to look more like it did leak out of the lab.
Certainly seems that way to
It's
me.
definitely not a conspiracy theory. It's not a fringe thought. Our own new president that's in a completely different political party is saying we are going to investigate this. Now, maybe he's going to come out and say there's absolutely no evidence. But when you listen to all these clips and you put them together, you're like, why did we not do a deeper investigation? Why are we not holding China responsible? Why are there no other, breadcrumbs all over the place? Why did coronavirus not come from a bunch of different places if it made this jump? It only came from like right next to this one lab. Is it all coincidence, or could it add up? And the interesting thing was just like how mentally, and maybe some of our watchers right now feel this way too, one way or another, but like when you double down and you say like, this is a Trump conspiracy theory, and then suddenly now, like maybe in the near future, we're gonna say like, this is what actually happened. We have conditioned ourselves as people to say like, I can't go back on my word because I tweeted this thing that's out there. I can't change my opinion because I made it all about Trump, and now all of a sudden, like new evidence comes out and we find out new truths. You see what I'm trying to say? It's like
people are gonna, even if it is a lab, people are gonna struggle to admit it.
Because like it can't be that way because in
Trump can't be right.
Well, maybe that's one way you could look at it. Like Trump kind of suggested this, and I was so anti-Trump, and I said what he is saying is a lie, and then maybe like a broken clock's right twice. Trump was either right or Trump didn't know what the heck he was talking about, but what he said did happen to be true. And now suddenly, like, we can't come to terms with being like, man, he was right. And I went out on social media and protested everything Trump said about it, and now I'm wrong. I can't, like, change my opinion, which is a very dangerous place for society to be. We should be having these open conversations.
Absolutely.
And we should all be changing our minds based on new information and everything. I mean, that's like what education is all about.
Sure. And I feel like if Trump was a little bit more reasonable of a human being,
absolutely,
people could have, been like, all right, I disagree with you politically, but maybe you're right. But one thing that I think we can agree on has proven to be fake, and I was kind of on this bandwagon. You can probably go back to one of these videos and see me saying this. There was a huge belief that the world was being riled up with coronavirus because Trump was the president, and everybody wanted to prove that he was doing a horrible job.
It was to get him out of office.
To get him out of office.
Like, this was the one way China could beat us.
And then the second Biden becomes president, the coronavirus will go away and they won't talk about it anymore.
I mean, I was guilty of that. I said, let's wait to postpone our wedding until after the election, maybe a week, and let's kind of see if suddenly, magically, it all disappears.
Yeah. And of course, the numbers
became way worse under Biden. Like
What,
January from March, like I'm not saying it's Biden's responsibility, but like Biden became president, took oath of office, and coronavirus spikes and becomes like the worst it could possibly be in the States. And now we're potentially on a fourth or fifth wave, and it's not a Trump thing, right?
So we were wrong about that. Obviously, the news loved to talk shit about Trump for ratings. And
well, the other weird thing is it feels like, up until maybe this moment, I don't know what to believe about where we're headed right now, but it sure has felt like the United States has come out of this quicker and better off than the rest of the world. I mean, I'm about to go to Italy and go to a wedding, and I have no problem getting into Europe. I still have to jump through some hoops to get back to the United States, but it just feels like we're back to normal. We've got a pretty high vaccination rate. We had so much vaccine that we're now shipping it out to countries that couldn't get any vaccines. I'm talking to my buddy who lives in Uganda, and he's like, I think he texted me today or yesterday, I forget the number, but it's like 5 or 10% of the country is vaccinated. Maybe it was like 5. He's like, it's going to be a long time before the continent of Africa gets enough vaccinations to even be close to whatever this magical herd immunity number is that we still don't even begin to know what it is.
Yep.
So in some ways, it just feels like, you know, the UK is very low, Europe is still really low, but America, we're like, man, if you aren't vaccinated now, it's because you have chosen not to be vaccinated. It's not because they can't get the vaccine. It's not because we're limited to AstraZeneca and we've pulled that from the shelves. Like, we kind of came out of this with the most options and the most ability to be vaccinated, and I feel like we're living our lives as normal now.
Yeah.
I feel like there's no reason to be fearful if you have the vaccine. You're not going to die, at least at this moment. So I don't know. It's just strange to think that like everyone was pointing their finger at America, being like, "You guys messed up. Trump doesn't know what he's doing. Everyone's dying. Your country's the worst." And we still are in the top. Were we number one still? I mean, I don't know if India's passed us, but like we are the worst.
No, Peru is like 4 times worse than us.
At the moment, but I'm saying all time.
All-time deaths or deaths per million?
All-time deaths.
Well, that depends on how big your country is and what the population is.
Yeah, but
the
like, does Russia have more people? China has more people? I don't know if you believe China. But like, China has more people. India has more people. There's more people living in India than the United States. But the United States still has more deaths than India.
Sure, but I think the fair number to look at is deaths per 1 million population.
Okay, we're still in the top 20. Like
I think
we didn't do great.
Yeah, top 20, yeah.
But all I'm saying is we did very poorly from those statistics. But now it feels like, all right, there's plenty of vaccinations.
Well, I mean, that was something that I've been bringing up for the
Peru's
last
not
year
going
and a
back
half.
to normal. You know, like Peru, I assume everyone's wearing masks.
I don't even know what it looks like in Peru. Like, I probably should have pulled up videos of clips from Peru, but I've wondered if, in the vaccine, we'll change this, obviously, but if there was no vaccine, and we had some countries that locked down hard, and then we had other countries like Sweden that didn't really lock down at all, over time, over the course of a couple years, 3 years or whatever, would everyone's mortality rate kind of even out?
Yeah.
The people that lock down hard right now would have no deaths right now, but then the deaths would come over time. And places like Sweden would have
you would
deaths
think that
at the
wouldn't
beginning.
happen just because it was kind of like when we figured out that you can incubate people and put them on their chest. Like that was, you know, we found out certain things like there's still the debate about ivermectin and some other, you know, drugs that you can give people. I would assume if you just played that game over time, it wouldn't pan out to be even because over time, the countries that locked down and prevented the spread of the virus would benefit from knowing what the other countries did to help the survival rate of the people that did get the virus, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on in Sweden compared to the other countries. Like, did those even out or did one of those countries come out ahead?
I think Sweden's numbers were not great, you know. Let's see. How do you spell Sweden? 2 E's?
I'm going to let you figure that one out.
What the heck? Oh, I'm in the United States. That's why it's not coming up. I'm so confused. What's going on here? Oh, it hasn't loaded yet.
The other weird argument, do you understand this one?
Tell me.
A lot of people are making this argument that...
Real quick, I have it here. So Sweden's deaths per million is 1438, and the United States was 1500. So our death rate is very close to Sweden's.
And Sweden did nothing, or they did nothing initially, and then they
did
switched?
almost no masks. I don't think they ever did masks in Sweden.
Don't compare them to the U.S. Compare them to their neighbor. Like, what did what's the name? Norway or Netherlands or?
Okay, so the Netherlands are
another
at
European country.
1,000, so they did a little bit better. And then there was one near them that was horrible. Is
Germany,
Finland
Italy,
over
Finland?
there?
You're talking about like a Nordic.
So Finland did great. Finland has a death rate of 176. That's crazy. So Sweden is 1,400 deaths per million. Finland, right next door, 176 deaths per million.
Look up Denmark. That's another one that's right there.
Denmark, 437 deaths.
So in
per
some
1
ways,
million.
Sweden's done worse than these other countries.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, I mean, is it linear? Can you say because of this that Sweden did worse, or is it something like Sweden's population? Or
I don't know. I think you.
Wasn't there something weird in Sweden where like it was kind of like Cuomo, where like they allowed something to get into the assisted living, and then that allowed
they didn't
so many,
protect the assisted living facilities.
and so like maybe that skews the number off. I mean, it's still the reality, but it's without that, maybe it would have been better.
Yeah.
The argument that I'm hearing, I'll get your opinion, and a lot of this I haven't fleshed out in my head, so I don't know if I have an opinion about it yet. But the argument I'm hearing now is that those people that do not get vaccinated are allowing this virus to mutate and become a super virus because, you know, they aren't vaccinated and they can just prevent it.
Mm-hmm.
And my thought is, well, don't we have way fewer people now that virus can find a way to break through compared to where we were before?
Yeah, it's better, but it's
I mean, if
not
there was
as good
ever
as it could be.
But if there was ever a time for the virus to become like a super spreader killer with like a higher contagious rate and all this stuff, like wouldn't it have been back in like December when no one had the vaccine? Or is it when there's pressure on it with the vaccine and there's now a much lower, 50% less lower population? I just see people pointing their finger and being like, if you don't get vaccinated, you're responsible for the outbreak of the next variant that could, you know, circumvent the vaccine. And I'm like, I see some truth in that. I can see that argument.
I think you could make that argument about every virus ever, you know? Like, if you don't get the flu vaccine this year, you're going to create a super flu.
Yeah, I just wonder from a numbers game, though, like, couldn't this have happened back? Because we invented or designed the vaccine, I think it was like days after the first coronavirus was really genotyped or whatever, you know?
Okay.
They came up with the DNA sequenced. They came up, it's like a marvel of humanity, right? We took the sequence and companies started making a vaccine that then had to go through the process. But once it got far enough through the process, they used the one that they came up with early on. But during that whole time, for like a year before anyone was administered that vaccine, all the people that were getting the virus had a chance of coming up with a mutation that could circumvent this vaccine that we've not given anybody.
That's a good point, yeah. I read some quote, and I don't know that this is true, but they said never in the history of the world has a virus mutated to become more deadly.
Okay. Never? Seems
That's
like a
what it
bold
said.
statement.
And and I read that and I said, well, that sounds like bull. But then I started thinking, and I'm like, well, if a virus becomes more deadly, then it limits its ability to spread, right? Like, wouldn't the most for a virus to, you know, if
there's a balancing act there, like you don't want to be too deadly. It's like Ebola. Ebola is extremely deadly. Like if you catch Ebola, like the chances of dying, I think, are great, and you die really quickly.
Yeah.
But because of that, it's very like I remember like I was in Dallas and there was like a patient with Ebola like 5 years ago, and they were like, oh my gosh, it's here in America. But the person died so quickly.
Yeah.
Did he die? Or maybe he did survive, but it's such a quick acting virus that it's very, like, that's the problem with coronavirus, is it's so slow acting.
Yeah.
You go 14 days or however long and you don't even know that you had it. Meanwhile, you've already spread it to all these people.
Yep.
So there's a balancing act of like how deadly is it versus how detectable is it. There's like 3 or 4 things that would make it the ideal virus, you know?
All right, let's watch this final clip. I am fading fast.
Major concerns about the virus on the eve of the opening ceremony for the Olympics in Tokyo. The new number tonight, more than 90 people inside the bubble now infected with the virus. And what will be different about that opening ceremony? James Longman again tonight from Tokyo.
Tonight, with the opening ceremony a day away, our first glimpse of some of the stars of these extraordinary games. Masks on for the women's gymnastics team arriving for practice. And for a brief moment, COVID forgotten as Simone Biles defies gravity in her much-anticipated all-round routine. But with concerns about COVID, USA Gymnastics confirming to ABC News that they have moved out of the Olympic Village and into a hotel. At least 91 people are now positive inside the Olympic bubble, 10 of them athletes. Across Tokyo, the numbers rising, once again reaching a 6-month high with nearly 2,000 new cases a day. And First Lady Jill Biden.
I would like to have more information there. These 10 athletes, were they vaccinated? Are they contagious? Do they have symptoms? Do they feel completely fine? Are they being forced to take tests every day, you know? And you know, it's like the same thing that was happening with the the UFC, you know? It's like all the fighters feel fine, and then they do the nose swab, and somebody's like, oh, you got it. And they go, what? How do I have it? I feel totally fine. You're not allowed to fight. You got it, even if you're not contagious or whatever.
Yeah.
So I wish we'd have more information.
Has arrived in Tokyo for her first solo international trip. One of just 950 dignitaries and officials at the 68,000-seat stadium to watch the opening ceremony.
And James Longman live from Tokyo tonight. James, this opening ceremony in the midst of a pandemic, what differences will we see?
Well, David, we know of the 950 guests, only about 150 or so will be Japanese, everyone wearing masks. And we know technology will be used to try to replicate a normal experience. But this will very much be a made-for-TV event. David?
You'll be right there for us. James Longman again tonight.
So if
Thank
this
you, James.
just happened, did you watch the opening ceremony?
I didn't even know the Olympics had started.
I feel the same way. I'm like not excited. And I love Summer Olympics.
I love the Olympics.
But I'm like not in touch with it at all. I didn't really know it started. I don't know that I really, now even knowing, I don't know if I'm really going to watch it.
Well, I don't even know how to watch it. I don't have cable or anything. Like, how do you watch the Olympics now?
And well, the Olympics is one of those few things that I feel like I want to watch that live. I mean, you don't really have a problem watching sports after the fact, right? Like you'll watch UFC the next day. Like football games and stuff, I don't want to watch it like after it's happened. I'm just going to look at the score and be done with it. Yeah. But the Olympics, as a kid, I just remember sitting at the TV and being like, and maybe it was already pre-recorded then.
It was.
But it was airing for the first time in America.
They fake
and
it.
you all sat like the moon landing or something,
Yeah.
and you watched, and you're like, is Michael Johnson going to break the record, you know? And you watch the event, and you're like, this is really patriotic and a family-oriented event.
I agree.
I'm like, I don't even know really the Olympics are going on. I was just returning something at a UPS, and people were debating if the Olympics were even going to go forward.
Oh, really?
Like, they think it's probably going to be canceled because of these outbursts and the break, you know, and everything. And how legit is it when you feel like maybe teams are disqualified and, like, you didn't actually have to play everybody? It's just a weird thing. I mean, was this supposed to have happened last year? Was the Olympics, this is the one that they delayed?
Yeah, it was the 2020 Japanese Olympics, and they had to push it to the 2021.
And then they're also like putting the NBA's been doing this too, but they put all the fake fans in.
Okay.
Do you think that's like a good idea, or should you just be like embrace that
I
the
know,
stadium is empty?
It needs to. It's like a historical event. Just let it be real.
Like, are the athletes being like, thank God it feels like there's people here cheering, even though they're LCD screens or whatever? I don't know. It's all so strange.
Photog Mike is in the house. He gave us a super chat. Thank you. He says, for real, like 80% of people not vaccinated won't get it now, and 99.8% of current deaths are due to unvaccinated people. Do you understand what that means?
I don't know what he's like for real, if he's agreeing with us or
80% of people not vaccinated won't get the vaccine now.
So there's still 20% of people that are not vaccinated. Maybe those are the people that can't get vaccinated. I mean, maybe 20% is children who they won't let get vaccinated.
No.
And then those people that aren't allowed to be vaccinated.
I don't know. Photog Mike, you got to pay us more money to clarify for sure.
One thing my dad was talking about, and this is another big news story, is there is such a disinformation push right now about, like, I've heard CNN saying, Fox News is saying you should not get vaccinated, and Google and all these websites and stuff are making up lies. And one of the lies my dad was like asking about, because he didn't know, was, is there a problem with people being infertile or not being able to have kids, or problems with the vaccine? And the news is like, that is a myth and it's not true. But I was thinking about it and I was like, don't we just not know? I mean, people have only been taking this vaccine for like 5 months. How could we possibly know one way or another, you know? Like, maybe people are getting pregnant, but nobody has had a child born since getting the vaccine.
Oh, the test subjects certainly have.
Like, when were they testing this stuff? Like, back in November? And doesn't have to be such a small number
No,
of
the people who are doing the vaccine tests, like the initial test, you know, when thousands of people volunteered.
Like our friend Dave.
Yeah.
But that still seems like such a small number of people. And they were given that, what, in October? So 9 months later, we're on month 7.
But you don't have to wait 9 months to get pregnant.
No, right. I see what you're saying. I'm not saying that they're infertile and can't get pregnant, but like any other future complications, like maybe there's issues with the baby's health, or maybe they're born and have a problem. Like, it just seems like I mean, there's drugs that are released where we don't know the complications for 10 years. It's like Accutane. Were you on Accutane as a teenager?
No.
And then all of a sudden, 10 years later, they're like, if you have Crohn's disease, maybe, you know, that was a side effect of Accutane, and like depression and all of these crazy things that people that were on that drug now have to deal with. We didn't know that for 10 or 15 years later. I remember everyone was like, Patrick, you have Crohn's disease and you took Accutane. And I was like, yeah, but I had Crohn's disease before I took Accutane. There's no way there was a link there for me. But all I'm saying is the media is trying to say that if you're reading this stuff about problems with the vaccine, it's false information. And on one hand, they're right. There's no way to know. But on the other hand, I'm just saying there's no way for you not to know if it's healthy or not because enough time hasn't gone by.
Right. Dennis, thank you for the super chat. He says, thank you for all these shows. My favorite, that's for sure. Well, we appreciate it. And Photog Mike does another super chat. I was joking, but thank you. He says, it means that some people only have one shot. It means that some people only have one shot, are not fully vaccinated. But out of all the people not vaccinated, 80% won't get the vaccine. Okay.
Did he make that more confusing now? Do you understand?
I mean, I do understand what he's saying. I just don't understand how that's relevant to what we've been talking about. But, you know, maybe he's watching a few minutes behind or something, so I'm not exactly
When
sure.
you hear people like the NFL, when they talk about some people have only gotten one shot, are there people out there that get one shot and then are like, I'm not getting the second shot?
You tricked me the first time, but not again.
Or is it just this weird window of like 21 days or 14 days where they just haven't gotten the second shot, but they will?
Maybe.
Because my understanding was getting the first shot wasn't really even close to being fully immune. That maybe you're 50% or 60%, but that there was still a chance that you could catch COVID and die until 2 or 3 weeks after the second dose. That's always what I heard.
Yeah.
So but I feel like if you've gotten the first dose, you're well on your way to you'll be vaccinated in the next month, fully vaccinated.
Maybe.
You're going to get the second dose because it's available, and then you're going to make it through.
I don't know. Maybe a lot of people are just super irresponsible, and they're like, I did it already. You know, they don't even think about it. They just don't care. Who knows? All right, man. I am fading here. I think we should call it.
You're not going to have your big debate that you've wanted to have all night?
I mean, if you think we can do it relatively quickly, then I did tease it at the beginning of the show, so maybe I should bring it up very quickly.
Yeah, you could bring it up. The House divided.
Yeah, House divided, man. So in many cases, when I make a stand, I feel like I can make my case very easily, and like I feel very strong because I don't usually feel that strongly, but like even this is a great example. I'm like, oh, I see both sides very clearly. Like, and in this situation, I do see both sides.
Oh, do you?
I do, and I'll explain why. The story is that Katie and I have recently had a baby. We've been here. Patrick went back to the States. He picked up a puppy. Patrick, for reasons that I don't want to get into because it's too complicated with the weight of the puppy and everything, Patrick brought the puppy back to Puerto Rico and then wants to leave in a week from now to go to Italy to a wedding. So Patrick asked me if I would watch the puppy. And I love dogs and I love puppies and I love watching puppies. Like, it's not a big deal. The problem is just that with this baby and our current schedule and the stress that goes along with the baby, I just said, hey, if the dog is house trained and it can, like, it's easy to take care of, no problem. But if not, it's going to be really difficult.
That's not what you said, but
I just said
that's what you feel.
What I said was, sure,
absolutely, if the dog's potty trained.
That's what I said. And then you said something, because I went back and looked, and you were like, well, as long as you take the dog outside every hour, it's fine. And I'm like, that is the opposite of potty trained, but we never spoke about it again, right? We never spoke about it again. Now, where I feel like we were unfair to you guys is that Kristen, after I told you this, and you should have relayed this to Kristen, I don't know if you did or not.
I was under the impression that, Lee's going to watch the dog.
But it's not potty trained.
I feel like potty trained is a spectrum here. You could have a puppy. First of all, it's a puppy. You knew it was going to be a couple months old. 3, 4, 5, 6. I just looked it up. Most dogs take 6 to 12 months to become fully house trained. Mm-hmm. And it's dependent on the size of the dog and everything, whatever. Mm-hmm. I'm just like, you knew it was a puppy. And potty training is like a spectrum. It's like either the dog has no regard for going outside and is pissing and shitting over everything, or the dog's going to hold his bladder and try to warn you that, hey, I need to go out, and that's where we're at. We're at the point where, like, he can ring a bell and he can, like, change his mood, and maybe he even barks at you to say, hey, I got to go outside. Like, taking the dog out once every hour, but he lets you know and he holds it and he's not going to soil, to me, that's like, it's not potty trained, but, like, he's well on his way to becoming.
He's well on his way, but he peed on Katie's feet today and he peed on my feet today.
But he pees because he's happy.
There's pee in my house when I'm holding
There's
the
a
baby.
dog that you watch that's completely potty trained. That's Bailey will still pee on your feet when she gets excited from a new person coming in. Would you say that dog's not potty trained, or that dog has a problem with excitement? Trust me, I don't want my dog peeing on anyone's feet the first time he sees them either. But like, I think these are two separate issues.
Okay, fine. We can debate this.
And you know, and I also feel like if the dog pees when you greet him, and
I don't greet him.
But it's not a big deal. I think, in my mind, maybe it is for you. In my mind, the big deal is like, dang it, the dog has pissed everywhere and I didn't know, and it's like this annoying thing. If the dog, like, you open the door and the dog sees you and tinkles a little bit, you know, you see it, you clean it up. It's frustrating.
If it's on the tile, it's not a big deal. If it's on the rug, it's a big deal to me. Like, especially now, I got a baby, you know?
But
Like, I
didn't
put
you
the
have
baby
a dog
on the...
and, like, didn't you hate your dog then? Like, your dog had to have pissed everywhere for the first 6 months.
Yeah, and it was super annoying, and that's why we let it outside most of its life.
But that's all I asked, and I was like, I felt like you knew what you were getting into, and you were like, okay, like...
No, see, I think from my perspective, I was like, I don't want to watch your puppy, but if it's potty trained, I will. So, I think I was ambiguously saying, like, no, I don't want to watch your puppy.
But you should have just said that.
Fine.
Instead,
That's fair.
you gave us the impression that, like, yeah, we will watch the dog.
I will if it was potty trained.
And I'm
That's
thinking,
what I
like,
said.
no dog is potty trained.
Well,
100%, 4 months,
you.
like...
That's on you.
But see, here's where it gets even more complicated, is because your wife was, like, in the opposite boat.
You're right.
She is not only like, we would love to watch the puppy, Lee, you're crazy, it's going to be fine, and maybe she was in the wrong, maybe because she doesn't realize how stressed she would be, and you do. I don't know. I don't want to get into that whole dynamic of your relationship. But she was like, we will absolutely watch the dog. No, Lee, you're being ridiculous. We're going to watch him. And it went as far as, like, when Kristen started to look for someone else to watch the dog, Katie was like, no, what are you doing?
You're
and so I'm like,
absolutely right.
What are we supposed to do?
You're absolutely
Your wife
right.
wants to watch the
You're
dog.
right.
You acted like you kind of would watch the dog.
You're right.
And so it felt like this weird thing. And then maybe where it went over was that Kristen said, okay, I'm going to find somebody to
hold on. Let me just go back just a little bit because I do want to say the fact that my wife said she wanted to watch the dog, that's kind of the trump card. That, like, there's no possible way that she could say that and then I could be, like, upset. Like, she said she wanted to do it.
She still says she wants to do it.
Okay. Now,
even after this whole argument,
I will just remind you, you were living in this house when we watched those other two dogs, right?
Yes.
You remember how angry she was at that puppy, right?
No, I do not. I do not remember. I remember it always being like, it's so great to have a puppy, and you were excited, and I thought she liked the puppy. I do not remember her being upset.
No, she was pissed.
I do not remember
and
this.
it was 100%, uh-oh.
Now, is he here?
Here we go, here we got it.
We get to see the... Okay, well, if he pees on me right now, it will be perfect for this podcast.
That would be great.
Come here, boy. Come here.
Pee on my white rug. I'm going to be so mad.
This little culprit. So this is the guy.
Okay, so
sit,
she was super pissed off at the puppy.
Yeah.
And it's not because she's heartless or anything. She was pregnant and she was just like hormonal. See how badly behaved this dog is?
No,
like this dog's a nightmare.
He just hasn't seen us, and he's excited, and he's seen you, and I don't want him to pee on his chair, but dude, this dog's pretty chill. Like,
he's not chill right now. I agree.
Sit, boy, sit.
You can prove how good or bad he is in the next moments.
He's pretty chill.
But anyway, Katie was very upset with that dog. And that dog, we forced it to live out on our back porch. We didn't even let that dog inside our house. You remember that, right?
Okay.
Okay. So all I said when you guys came over and I saw the dog, I said, I think it would be better if you found somebody else to watch it. Like, and I wanted to be clear, and I said this at dinner. I was like, If you guys ever truly need anything from me, I'll do anything. If you said, Lee, we've tried everything and like there's no one that can watch the dog, of course I would watch the dog. All I was trying to say was, I just think it would be better for my sanity and my wife's sanity.
He
Come
wants
here, dog.
to see you
Come
because
here.
he feels
Come
like
here.
you're giving
Look,
him a...
the dog literally just peed on me. Like, I literally have pee on me right now. Okay, so if
But
that
he's done.
doesn't,
He's done.
if
Now
that
it's
doesn't
good.
prove my point, like he just peed on the sofa right here.
But it's
like how much more of a better point could I make?
It's this excitement. He was excited to see you. Like
but
he has not peed in this house on anything. He did the first night I
There's
brought him
pee
in.
everywhere.
Because he's excited to see you. I
don't care if he's excited or he's mad to see me or he's
I'm just making
lonely.
the argument. I'm just making the argument that that is different than potty training. Because we have a dog that you watch all the time that is extremely well trained, but she still does that. She will still do that. And you're like, is that a potty training problem, or is that like it's related? It's urine, but it's like it's just slightly different. He's not going around lifting his leg, peeing on everything. He does do that, and it's annoying, and I don't know the answer to that.
Like, he's just gonna have to outgrow that, and like...
Yeah, and that takes time, but like...
It takes time. But when I'm holding my son, and a dog jumps on me, and then pees on me and my son, it just adds a little layer of stress to my life.
Sure, I totally understand that.
So, the only point that I was trying to make, and maybe I didn't ask in the nicest way or whatever, and I understand from your perspective it doesn't make sense because my wife already said she wanted to watch it.
And she's going as far as saying, like, stop looking for other people to watch it. And I'm like, I don't know what to do.
You are right.
And Kristen doesn't know what to do, and then Kristen
You
becomes
are
correct.
absolutely right. And like, Katie should have talked to me, and I should have reminded her how pissed off she was at that other puppy, and how stressed she's been with the new
Today,
baby.
we had people come over that are going to look after the dog.
Yeah.
And today, the whole day, Katie was just like, this dog's so good. He's chilling. He's like...
I get it.
And I'm like, I feel like it's like this argument two of you are having, and maybe you never had the argument. Like, you feel one way and Katie feels the other way, but they're both being projected onto us in different ways.
Yeah. Okay. So, all I meant to say...
It's better than the egg debate.
All I meant to say was, I understand that Katie told you that she wanted to watch the dog. I think she's kind of forgotten like how stressed out she can get. You know, I'm like the guy who sees how stressed out she can get. Like, Katie's the most chill person ever until getting pregnant and having a baby, right? And so like I have to live with it. I have to see her upset. I have to try to make her happy. And I just was like, I think this might be a little bit much with our new baby who's screwing on time.
I totally understand and get it.
So all I wanted to say is like, if you guys can just try to find someone else to watch him, that would be great. And if you can't, of course, we will honor what we said.
So let me like continue this debate.
Yes.
Let's say he's potty trained.
Yeah.
And he has, I don't know what a normal dog that's potty trained, like has to go out 5-8 times a day. That's this size. Like if you have a huge dog, they have a huge bladder. Maybe they can hold their bladder like all day and they go out twice.
Not just a part of that, but also a part of like the training and like, do I have to put him on a leash, or can I just open the door and he'll run out and pee and come back, or can I walk out with him and he'll walk near me and pee and then come back, or do I have to have a leash with me all the time? Like little details like that when I'm holding a baby are just exponentially more stressful than if I didn't have a baby.
All I'm saying is like you didn't relay any of that. You were like, if he's potty trained.
You're right.
I could see going deeper into this. I could see where if he's potty trained and he can go out and pee and come right back, you would still be like, I gotta feed this dog, I gotta play with this dog, I should take this dog on walks. Like there's many more things to a dog than just the potty training.
Sure.
So when you say, I will definitely watch the dog if he's potty trained, and I'm like, I don't know if he's gonna be potty trained yet.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like he's doing really well considering where he's at.
Yeah.
I'm like, there's a whole other list of issues that would have not been good for you either. And Katie was making that point today. Katie was like, I think Lee forgot what it was like to have a dog because you have to take him out. You have to take him on walks. You have to play with him. He's going to bark. You got to put him to sleep. You have to have him on a schedule. Like, there are all of these other things. And you were just acting like the potty training thing is the deal breaker.
But if he was stressful thing. That's the, like, if the dog's
What if he's nipping at your child all the time? You would have been like...
Yeah, that would be really bad.
Okay, well, that's very common with a puppy. So, like, I just feel like you should have been like, hey, man, I think with my child being 6 months, that's way too much to ask.
Sure. Well, it's not too much to ask, and I don't want you guys to feel like I was offended that you asked.
I'm fine if you said it's too much to ask. Like, I would have preferred you have said that
than to have wound
up in the boat that we were in.
You're right. In hindsight, absolutely. But we have still not yet gotten
gosh.
to the height of this argument.
Okay.
And so I told you guys, I was like, I just think it would be better if you found somebody else to watch the dog. So we go to dinner last night with some friends, and then Kristen reveals to me that she's got it all worked out. What was Kristen's plan?
So I think, I don't know the series of events here, but Kristen found a dog sitter, and the dog sitter would come over and take care of the dog, but the dog sitter would stay on our floor in the house and let the dog stay in his environment and stay in his bed, and this is what other people do in the neighborhood, and so she just thought, oh, this dog sitter comes highly recommended, and this is what everyone else does. I'm going to reach out to her and see if she'll do it. And of course, she's like, yes, I would love to do it, and she was pretty cheap, so it was like reasonable. But the part that I think Kristen should have relayed to you, and my understanding is she did relay it to Katie to some degree, but maybe it wasn't relayed to you, and it's like a complicated, game of telephone.
Yeah.
Is that you were like, I don't want some stranger staying in my house watching your dog.
Yeah, so what Kristen did was hired a stranger to live in the house with me and watch the dog in my own home, which is one of the craziest things I've ever heard.
Is it really, though? Is it any different than having a nanny? Like, if you had a nanny for your child, and I'm like, why do you have this stranger in the house? It's a weird dynamic that comes with having roommates. So if you had a masseuse, if you had a maid, if you had a nanny, if you had a cook, and the other roommate was like, I don't really want a random guy cooking food upstairs. It's all in the same vein.
It's different if someone comes over and makes a meal, or somebody gives me a 1-hour massage, or someone lives in my house for 7 days.
But you could have a live-in nanny. You could have an au pair? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
And she's staying overnight.
I agree, and that's kind of weird too. Like I would love somebody to help me with my kid all the time, but I don't want somebody living in my house with me, so I don't do that.
So your argument was just like, I don't want some stranger in my house. But then you were like, you should have the dog go to her house. And I'm like, I just don't know where this person lives. I don't even know if they're on their own. I don't know if they're in the gated community. I don't know if they're next to a highway.
Sure.
I would just prefer not to give my brand new puppy to some nanny, dog watcher, and then in their home and stuff, where I could probably find somebody locally who would take them, which is what I think we're going to do. But it just became... I think Kristen should have asked you first.
Yeah.
But she also makes a good argument that she mentioned this to Katie, and Katie was just like, that sounds good to me.
Okay.
And it's like, and I don't know, maybe even that's not the correct story. I don't want to
No, that is. But, and that's, I stayed up with Katie for hours. I'm like, Katie, why did you act like it was okay having a stranger live in the house with us watching a dog? And she was like, I know, I don't know. I was just being nice. I didn't really think about it. I thought it was the only option because you didn't want to watch the dog, so this was our only option. And I'm like, how is that our only option? And it just got ridiculous. And so then I told you, I'm like, just get anyone to watch the dog on their property. And then you started going down some crazy road of like, the dog needs to be in its home and it needs to feel comfortable. And I'm like, it's a dog. It's a dog.
I did not say that with our neighbors. You were arguing the dog doesn't need to be in his own house. She can go to the stranger's house. And I was like, I just don't want to do that. It would be like you saying it'd be like me saying send your child.
It's not the same.
Send your child to the
It's
nanny's home.
not the same as my child.
And you're like, no, I want the baby in my own home, but the nanny can come to me.
It's not like that. And if the nanny had a good home, I would.
But I just don't know I don't know anything about the dog.
In fact, we do have someone that watches our son, and we do take our son to her house.
Yeah, but it's a good friend of ours. They went to our bachelor and bachelorette party. They're really good friends of ours.
So
I don't know. It's just I think it was just a lack of communication, and
it was. And we started the problem. We started the problem by me not being clear, and then Katie saying, "Not only I want to."
And back to what you just said, though, is you say it's just a dog, but in my mind, if this dog was a year too old, I would be much more lenient on what could happen. But I've read these dog books, and it's from birth to 6 months, it's make or break for the dog.
Sure.
If the dog starts biting everybody and, becomes a liability, or the dog's constantly barking at everybody, or the dog lifts its leg and pees all the time, like after 6 months, you'll never undo those behaviors. So in my mind, I'm like, if the person can come to the house and watch the dog here, or we can make his life as normal for the 7 days that we're gone, that's going to just help with him. And it's not because I'm trying to be some like diva crazy person with a dog. It's just because I know that it's important at this moment. If he's a year or two old, I would be like, hey, you can do whatever you want with the dog. The dog can sleep in your bed. The dog can have its own crate. I would be more flexible. But because it's like he's at 4 months old now and I feel like we've gotten so many things instilled in him, I don't want it just to be like, hey, watch the dog and throw him in your backyard and don't even let him in the house.
Yeah.
I feel like that would be really bad for his development.
Yep.
And so, I don't know, you're just like, it's just a dog. And I'm like, but
I'm not saying, like, okay, so somebody just wrote, Patrick, why don't you just board the dog for 7 days? Like, I did that with Leo. I boarded the dog for 7 days. Dude, teach that dog to be good. Why don't you let him sit on the ground?
I'm trying to get him.
Is he going to pee on the ground?
No, he's not going to pee.
Well, then put him
I
on
mean,
the
maybe he
ground.
needs
Let's
to
see
go.
what he does.
I
Why
just-
would he need to go? She just took him out.
I think she said
he's potty trained.
She just said, I didn't take him out. And I'm like, I don't know why you didn't just take him out before you brought him
Is
down
that
here.
what she said?
She said, I haven't taken him out.
Oh, no.
So I need to take him
Well,
out.
then
And maybe
is this
that's
the end of the show?
This might be the end of the show. But
all right, the dog already peed on me, but it
see,
has to go
he's
again.
telling me he needs to go, and that's pretty good training that, like, if you just pay attention, he's going to go out and pee
I mean, I
instantly,
don't see
and he'll-
how he has any more pee after he peed on me, though.
He just tinkled on you.
What?
He just tinkled on you. That wasn't a full pee.
All right, well, good to see you guys.
Say goodbye. Gibson.